Okay, so hello to everyone from me. You have to excuse any mistake I make. It's my first presentation here. My name is Ηρω Μελαχροινακη and I come from Skopelos. That's why I chose to present to you my compatriot Pavlos Nirvanas and his work. So to begin with, I would like to share some biographical data first about him. Let's change. Petros Kappa Apostolidis is known by the pseudonym Pavlos Nirvanas. The pseudonym Nirvanas was chosen due to his affinity for the philosophy of Nirvana of the Buddhist religion at that time. His father was Konstantinos Apostolou Koumniotis, or later known as Apostolidis, born in Skopelos in 1811. He was an eager writer that held a high position at the bank of Stefanović Skilitsi at Tiflida and Mariupoli. Pavlos' grandmother, Kyratso Koumnioti, also from Skopelos, was an amateur midwife, and his grandfather, Apostolis, that was from Kimi in Evia. That's why the last name of the family was first Koumniotis. He was the president of the Association of Barrel Manufacturers on the island. His mother was Marietta Ioannou Ralli, born in Chios and graduated from Hill Academy in Athens. She had 12 siblings that worked in commerce around the world. In fact, her siblings had a positive impact on Piraeus in Athens, as they were benefactors of, and founders of the Vironi College and Rallios Academy, etc. Pavlos was born in May 1816 in Mariupol, Ukraine, and was named Petros after his older brother, who died at a young age. The same year, his family moved to Skopelos till 1871. In 1871, they moved to Athens so that he could go to school there. So when he went to school in Piraeus and asked where he was from, he replied that he was from Peparithos. Peparithos is the ancient name for Skopelos. After all, there he had lived the first and most tender, happy, and innocent years of his life. Pavlos was a keen writer with a great interest in literature. In 1881, his real name, Petros Apostolidis, appears in his writings, and 3 years later, his pseudonym Pavlos Nirvanas is being used for the first time. He started studying medicine in 1882 and became a medical officer in the Navy and a general practitioner from 1914 to 1920. By the end of 1909, he married Lili Michoglu and had 2 children, Dr. Konstantinos Apostolidis and banker Spyros Apostolidis. After their divorce in 1924, he remarried with Sofia Sigala, that was from Syros, and they married on the island here. In 1926, so let's see, give me a moment. That's his second wife. And they had 3 children, Marios, Maria, and the known writer George Apostolidis. From 1925 to 1932, he was a member of the City Council of Piraeus. He spoke Russian, exceptional French, Latin, Italian, and that's why he was a translator as well. In 1923, he was honored with the Literature and Arts Award, and in 1928, he joined the Academy of Literature and Fine Arts of Athens. He died in November of 1937 of pneumonia in Athens. So let's be here. Pavlos Nirvanas is a neoclassical writer with a vast catalogue of literature. He published collections of poems, novels, plays, and editorials. He also wrote articles in journals known in Greek as chronographima that captured events of his time. He was exceptionally talented, gave academic validity to chronographima, and had an influence on Cypriot literature. He is considered one of the fathers of the Greek literature. Pavlos and Kesarios Daponde, also a great writer from Skopelos, had a great need to write in many different genres. Pavlos was close to many writers of his time, advancing the careers of Gregory Xenopoulos and Nick Cavadias. He was a friend with Alexandros Papadiamandis, who lived at Pavlos' family house in Skopelos during his studies there. Let's see. Pavlos, in the beginning, wrote in the conservative form of Greek katharevousa, and then changed to modern Greek. He was affiliated with Kostis Palamas, the great Greek poet, writer, etc., who wrote 2 poems dedicated to Pavlos, the first in June 19 and the second after Pavlos' death. Nirvanas belonged to the circle of the great school of thought and literature of Sporades, together with Kesarios Daponte, Alexandros Papadiamandis, as well as Gazis, Kostandas, Philippidis, and many others before him. His publication, Greek Love of Reading or Heart, appeared in Estia in 1950 and was taught at schools in secondary education. I'm sorry about my PowerPoint presentation, but I don't have experience on how to show you. However, his also important publication, Greek Children, in 1937, was not taught at schools. Pavlos Nirvana's appearance was of a Stoic philosopher whose solitude was reflected in his work. He was pleasant and polite with everyone. His aesthetics, education, altruism, and humanitarian views showed in his work. His style of writing was simple, without any unnecessary complexities, and also sarcastic, which was mentioned by Telos Agras and Kostas Uranis in their critique of Pavlos' writing. Pavlos was followed and was influenced by many different, by different trends, including Romanticism, Symbolism, Naturalism, and writers such as Nietzsche, Ibsen, D'Annunzio, Ruskin, Tolstoy, Anatole France, Nun Hamsun, Boyson, and many others. Nirvana's philosophical thought resembles more Tolstoy, Bergson, and Nietzsche, especially in his early writings. By doing so, both Nietzsche and Pavlos take realism on board instead of metaphysical stance and its presence in their quotes. Live in a way that makes you proud of yourself, says Nietzsche. The biggest wisdom is to improve oneself and hence be proud of it, says Pavlos Nirvanas. Let's see. According to Iulia Vroutsi's PhD, since 1925, Pavlos had already excluded aesthetics from his early writing style or influences by Nietzsche and showed elements of realism instead of an opportunistic journalism dominated his time. At the beginning, Pavlos admired the followers of Romanticism, Paraschos and Valaoritis. However, he did not use this style of writing for very long. Afterwards, his way of writing aligned with picturing reality and absolute truth. He rather focuses on the aesthetics of his writing and symbolism as a trend. After his father died, he turns more to medicine. Nonetheless, he does not stop writing. By doing so, a simple but pragmatic point of view shows in his work. His work also aligns with satire instead of journalism in a way that he is thought of a philosopher instead of a journalist. For instance, the titles of his pieces have often dual meanings. Nirvanas indirectly commented and influenced on political and cultural issues, but never criticized them. When Nirvanas commented on Karagatsis' writing, Karagatsis was pleased with Nirvana's comments on his fellow contemporary writers, addressing them as the exceptionals, ironically addressing them. In the earlier work, he used the pseudonyms Chacholos and Apollinarios. Later on, as Pavlos Nirvanas, he subtly criticizes general issues and views cautiously the Byzantine chronicles, as we say in Greek, the chronographema, of Ioannis Mallas as the ones who set the paradigm for chronographema in general, a journalistic yet philosophical style of writing, with subtle critique and the reality described through fantasy. It's like a paradox. In his work, irony is predominant, also coexisting with the philosophical stance. Other elements of his work include excess, contrast, surprise, lyricism, verbal irony, and reality coexisting and obtain a prominent place in his legacy. Also, Paraskevas, one of his main characters, states Pavlos' own ideology and views on women's impact on society. The fact that his work touched upon rather contemporary issues resulted in some authors saying his work lacked depth and legacy. However, Pavlos obtained a journalistic depiction of reality with some philosophical stance and irony, and so that couldn't be perceived as true objective journalism. He considered journalism as a non-objective genre and depicted issues in real time with his own commentary. This type of style is considered authentic. For instance, when he focused on a topic or a road, he viewed them as a constellation of factors, namely people traveling on it. He didn't really focus on the actual road per se. He rather treated it symbolically as an element of a system with an ironic, satirical, and philosophical tone in his writing. In his chronicle writings, the chronography, as I said, he often expresses disappointment and the need for humanity, especially in times of work. Also, his work shows the ordinary depiction of small moments of life, which look meaningless, but they are not. He genuinely looks for meaning in his writing, and now we see some letters to the great Greek poem Angelos Kelenos from Nirvana to him. Nirvana's work had a cosmopolitan feeling. His aesthetic and artistic direction contributed in the establishment of chronicles based on his attention to detail and the balance between shape and content. In his books Asophos, 1916, and Reasons and Counter-Reasons, 1925, includes dialogue in his narrative. Pavlos sets their philosophical issues with his renowned irony and the balance between comedy and satire. With this comical tone, he becomes more accessible and understood by the audience. His work has a brilliant and mischievous tone, which reveals him from being both smart and highly educated. He once said, "Thank God who sent me a maid. I'm thinking it was God, because if it was the devil, the maid would have been smarter." Pavlos' work, the Chronographeme, was established as a philosophical depth despite its small size of text. In fact, Vrutsi notes that the philosophical dialogue in the Platonic dialogues is chosen by Nirvanas in order to grasp reality with comical and philosophical elements. By doing so, this pragmatic philosophy includes Socrates' technique and irony to discuss easy matters in a focused manner and serious tone. This type of dialogue in the Chronographema is part of the tradition of the philosophical dialogue, which together with the more academic chronicles defines its true version and deepest philosophical meaning. All this synergy creates a fully fictional writing. Nirvana was definitely philosophical. He also wrote of the crazy heroes in a stereotypical manner within the value system of literature of his time. And that because besides as a doctor, he was genuinely interested in how people feel. In his pieces Dogs, 1910, and Crazy, 1917, criticizes in a satirical manner the social isolation of the main heroes by scrutinizing the civilized behavior of the aristocrats. In Dogs, another work of his, influences from Romanticism are appeared together with elements of his idiosyncratic style. Perhaps his own interest in the medical state of mental illness or even, quote, craziness reflects his profession. Nevertheless, he makes use of this interest to criticize the inhuman way in which aristocrats mistreated mentally ill persons. This class is depicted as harsh and threatening. In his theatrical work, he used poetry and symbolism that is a stage of social values. His train of thought was independent and clear of the labels and stereotypes of his era. His last play, Elixir of Youth, was a farce of dramatic elements. I'm not sure I passed because I have this. Elixirio, is this? This is the one. All in all, the work of the multi-talented Pavlos Nirvanas focuses on humans and has an internal quality that treats time fearlessly. Diedrich notes that Pavlos balances internal and external states of life and shows the ongoing psychological changes as depicted in situations and various facts. The skills of his to understand the inner state of people distinguished him and Karavitsas also, amongst others. In his writings, one can find the values of the society in his era and psychometric elements. He construed historical events removed from real time so that could reflect on them in a minimal manner in his symbolic communications with his audience. For this reason, Pavlos Nirvana's work is timeless, indomitable, and rich, a Greek enlightenment. In his multi-faced writer, he is a multi-faced writer who owns his work and shapes reality without destroying it. His aesthetics led him to develop unique pieces using an attractive and even ironic style. His work was very popular. Often readers would mail the paper Estia and debate about his work in public or amongst friends. This is because he enabled his readers to think critically and not subside to harsh events of life. Crime in Psychiko, 1928, demonstrates amazing aesthetics evidence in theory, and his writings, the last decade of his career. With regards to his stance towards Dadaism and Futurism, he wasn't influenced by either of these, as he viewed them as not artistic enough and rather excessive for him. In fact, he turned against Marinetti, the poet, writer, and founder of the Futurism in the beginning of the 20th century. Pavlos Nirvanas, although he was heavily criticized with regards to his actual content of his work, proved to be the most popular and published author of his time. He depicted the philosophy of reality and focused on the momentary presentation of human beings on their ordinary life, behaviors, motions, sentiments, appearance, and mental state. He very often thinks and states his own values and philosophical thoughts that dominate this paradigm and genre. It's rightful to say that he was a writer-philosopher who, consciously or not, throughout his whole work, explored human thoughts and psyche, tried to improve human thinking throughout process and underpin the position of human thinking. That's why he is considered to be the father of the Greek psychiatric studies. He didn't create a philosophical stream, but followed many, as I said. He followed materialism, supported that humans create their own conscience and general education, including manners. Besides, he lived into the basic norms of materialism, criticized religious matters, looked at political viewpoints, etc. Closing this presentation, I would like to say that Pavlos Nirvanas is a master of arts, a doctor whose ideas are based on a scientific foundation, whilst he served and developed his art. He also promoted indirectly these philosophical curiosities. He believed that worldly truth is impossible to be found via science only. With such views, Pavlos developed multi-phased masterpieces. He might have occasionally taken a pessimistic motion, but loved and depicted beauty. He indirectly criticizes awful events throughout irony and paradox, without following an ideology exclusively. He was a rebel who didn't literally rebel, but rather served Greek literature. He was a talented writer with a philosophical dimension. And before I thank you all for your attention and ask, sorry again about my stress, I would like to thank Mr. Vlachakis for this opportunity to be amongst you. Thank you very much.